I was just explaining to some people about a half hour ago at an event why this is my favorite town hall of the year, because we don't have hundreds of bills yet, we just have dozens, and which means there's more time for questions, which is my favorite part, because I think District 19 residents are the most thoughtful people in the state of Idaho, so I'm very excited to be here. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna introduce ourselves real quick, let you know what committees we sit on, and then the senator will go last, and then she's gonna just dive right in. Budget, Medicaid, and then we'll work our way back and we'll just get right into questions. That sound okay? Okay. All right, I'm Representative Chris Mathias, District 19, Seat B. I serve on the Education Committee every morning, and then in alternating afternoons, I serve on the Agricultural Affairs Committee, which is the only committee I've been on my whole time in the legislature, and the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee, or Jude and Rules as we call it colloquially in the building. So, with that, Representative Church.
Monica Church, and I sit on House State Affairs, Ways and Means, Local Gov, and Resources and Conservation.
Is that all?
That's it. And was newly elected the House Democratic Caucus Chair, so this is my first term as that as well.
Well, that wasn't a very long introduction. My goodness, I was like wanted to hear a little backstory, didn't you? Well, heavens! It's so good to see you all, friendly faces. I hope. I was sharing with somebody. I got up at 5 today, and it's going to go even past 7 tonight. So we'll try to get your questions answered, and then I got to get prepared for the next day. But I'm Senator Melissa Wintrow. It's just an honor and a blessing to serve our district. What a gift of service, the service, to this community. We have a great community, don't we? I just love it. So I am just honored to be the Senate Minority Leader. I serve on the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee. That seems appropriate. I sit on Health and Welfare and Judiciary and Rules on the Senate side. I serve on the Criminal Justice Commission and a few other things outside, and I co-chair the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee, which is responsible for all those great research projects that come in. So legislators say, hey, I want you to research something, and we look at all those projects during the session, then we vote on them, and then you see things like research on the Idaho Learning Academy or the coroner system or those kind of things. So shall we talk about money? So you probably heard there's a budget crisis, and it's really more of a revenue crisis. And as you remember, as we talked with you last year, that the legislature was busy about decreasing the revenue stream at about the tune of $450 million, $50 million in voucher schemes, and $400 in tax cuts. And mostly what we've seen in the last 4 years are income tax decreases that unfortunately they benefit probably the wealthiest among us and not really working class and lower income families. That's kind of been the mantra of the legislature. So we've cut $4 billion out of our revenue stream the last 4 or 5 years, and that adds up. And after last year when we did that many tax cuts, we basically did 4 years of tax cuts in 1 year. After we actually fabricated my language, we constructed a revenue number that allowed the legislature, I think, to back into its list of things it wanted, and the biggest thing it wanted for those folks in power was a tax cut. So unfortunately, even though we were screaming from the rooftops that this is not the responsible conservative thing to do, to basically bankrupt the government, that's where we are. And now cuts are probably being justified because we don't have the money. And so what I think is really important that we all remind all the legislators that we do have the money. We have over $1 billion in rainy day funds. We've seen that all in the news. We know it. We see it's like $1.56 billion. So we have that. We could restore some of the revenue that we've cut, right? The governor has a few creative solutions that, to build a bridge to get to the next year aren't bad. So we're in this position where I think Democrats are advocating for the simplest and easiest thing to do is actually restore some of the revenue that you cut. Admit the mistake, you cut too hard, and just admit it and fix it, right? You don't have to even swipe all of it, right? But even some of it. We accepted a new revenue number based on the economics and the predictions, and it's a little bit higher than we thought. So that gives a little wiggle room based on what the economists say. And so again, if we would just take a little bit of revenue, restore that, have that little buffer, potentially take some rainy day funds, right? Because that's what it's for, and don't do any more tax cuts. We might see the revenue steady out over the next year, so we don't have to make these deep cuts. And that's what you're probably here to talk about, are the deep cuts that are being asked of Medicaid. The fall, the governor called for holdbacks, and so all the agencies, when they come into my committee, what I've done is I've emailed the director of budgets and said I want to know a specific list of everything the 3% cuts, and what it's going to cut, and how that impacts whether it's public safety, community health, all those things, right? Because that's really what I think we expect from our government, is an efficient, effective government, but certainly one that keeps the lights on, paves the roads, make sure we have public schools and teachers, make sure that we have good quality health care, and that we're taking care of folks in the safety net and the vulnerable populations, right? And by the way, Medicaid expansion is one of the things that the voters approved, and it's actually a big benefit to the economy, isn't it? It puts about $1 billion into the economy every year. Medicaid expansion actually is only probably about 20% of the entire health and welfare budget, right? And it's helping folks in those lower income brackets. So that's the big picture. And so now in JFAC, every day we're hearing from agencies, and they're talking about what they've cut, what they're told to cut, and then we're asking hard questions. And today a memo went out this afternoon, or this morning I think even, the governor is asking each state agency to come up with 1%, 2%, or 3% scenarios for additional cuts, which I just don't know how the agencies are gonna do it. I have people in my office day in and day out. I just left CASA programs. Think about all those needs that people have, and they're just stressed. We're losing staff. It's just too much. And again, the best and easiest way is to say we blew it. Let's put some money back and take care of the people that we promised we would. So that's the big picture there. And it's been all over the news, right? You've seen us all out there. Should we start taking questions, or you want to kind of stay there and then we'll kind of move? Yeah.
Okay, the cuts they just announced today, 1%, 2%, and 3%. Is that for the balance of this fiscal year or for next fiscal year?
This year. Because here's what's happening is they're talking about tax conformity, and it's possible that the federal tax conformity bill might hit harder than we think, and we might have to go backward. And that's not gonna help anyone. So there's gonna be some tough decisions made, I think, in House Rev and Tax, which I don't sit on. I forget who's on that. Is it Gannon?
Steve.
And Steve. And so all the revenue, all the tax bills originate out of the House first. And so they're talking and negotiating theirs. I know one that was printed, but again, what I can't overestimate is this. What my mom told me back when I was a kid, you don't spend down to the last bit, right? You have a little buffer in case you do have an emergency. My mom and dad always taught me that. And what we've done is cut it so hard that we're underwater, and now people are fighting for scraps. And there's no need for it. There's no need. I just talked to one of my colleagues. I said, the easiest way to do this is what I said to you all. He said, it ain't ever gonna happen. I said, and so we're gonna put all these people through the stress and the harm and the devastation. So that's the way we're gonna choose. It's really tough for me to accept that. Yes.
How did they get the amount for the rainy day? Because I thought $1 billion was kind of it.
Yeah.
And now I'm hearing 1.4.
Well, the question is, how they get that much rainy day funds? Well, over time, this legislature is like Scrooge McDuck. We like to look at the money. So over the years, we actually uncapped the amount you can put in reserves. So when, everybody likes to say, poo-poo on Biden and that administration, boy, we were infusing the economy. And that ARPA money flowed into the state, and we took it. And we did some things we always wanted to do, and then would we do all these tax cuts. But in the meantime, we did bolster the rainy day funds, and we actually legislatively, we statutorily changed the cap so we can have it all there. But like I said, we're Scrooge McDuck now. We're just sitting there watching all the coins stack up. We're not using it, and this is the exact time to use it, even though it was a self-made, self-inflicted wound. You're gonna hear me say that a lot. Oh, you better get me off the podium.
When they see on the news that they're going to cut community and home-based
Yeah.
services, is that like for home?
Okay.
Is it, what is?
Yeah, so this question,
No, dental, no.
right, okay. So this question flows into the Medicaid budget decision. So again, all these agencies are forced to make cuts. Well, in Medicaid, our safety net program, which was founded actually under conservative Republican leadership back in the day, right? There are entitlements, there are programs that are required by the federal government that you can't get rid of, and there's state programs, right? Those are protected by statute. There are other really amazing services that aren't statutorily required, and I have a list of those. I might have brought them with me. But there are things like dental services, home and community-based services, believe it or not, are not mandated. There's some podiatry stuff, hospice, I mean, you name it, it was on there, right? So now what the governor's told the Department of Health and Welfare is like, okay, you gotta come up with 22 million more. And what the department has done is share with us, here are these optional programs. Here's your smorgasbord of what you wanna cut. Well, I don't wanna cut any of it, all right? I'm not gonna vote for anything to cut because we don't have to. We have the means not to. But those are the kind of things that are on the chopping block. Now, I do hope that my colleagues across the aisle are also saying, gosh, I don't think I want to cut some of those things. You know why? Because the public pressure has been great.
Yeah.
The first day of session, there were hundreds of people in here supporting Medicaid and expansion. The other day I came out of JPAC, there were hundreds of people talking about the services being cut. This is the time and the most essential moment to get out there and lift that voice and come to the State House because it is mattering. My inbox is flooded, right? And I can't keep up with it. So you gotta keep those calls, keep those emails, keep those appointments, just keep the pressure on.
I know some of you, many of you, perhaps most of you, will want to come down here and help us engage in the hand-to-hand of dealing with this. So the senator is really good about making sure that, if you want to come down and testify on a very particular thing or how you can make your voice heard in a very effective and tailored way, please make sure that you are receiving her communications so that you get that in a timely fashion. I just want to provide a couple quick updates on some legislation that I decided to just get into the queue before the circus officially begins. But before I begin, I have a lot of friends in the room, but I do want to give a special shout out to Councilwoman Stead, who is here. Interestingly, she is my constituent, but I'm not her constituent. This is the weird world of politics that we're in, so I'm glad she's here. And then I want to give another shout out to someone who is really one of the main reasons that I love doing what I do. House Bill 500 was one of my first bills, it was my first bill of the session, and I'm calling it the e-bike bill, but the words e and bike show up nowhere in the bill, but it's just the easiest way to articulate this bill. But before I tell you the story, I want to say that the young man who gave rise to this bill is right down here in the front row, Sean Norton. So please, after you've heard what happened to him, you will want to give him a strong round of applause. So a couple years ago, Sean was coming home from swim practice. He was on the 15th Street northbound bike lane. Driver sped past him, and then cut right in front of him, caused a car accident. The police came and they cited the driver. They cited the driver for violating, I forget the exact section of code, I knew it, but the last 3 digits are 6. And it's the section that all of us as motor vehicle drivers are obligated to exercise a duty to care, a duty to avoid colliding with cyclists. And the driver of the vehicle, an attorney, decided to contest the citation, and he won. And in the judge's ruling, he said that the words electric assisted bicycle show up nowhere in that section of code, and he couldn't read it into there because in other sections of code, electric assisted bikes are acknowledged. And so the Norton family reached out, said we have a problem, and so we're in the process of fixing it. I tell this story not because I'm very proud of the work that the Norton family has done and that we've done together to get this bill this far, but because when a lot of us have significant doubts about the value of politics and the role of politicians, I'm comforted by knowing that I might not hold a gavel and I might not be something big one day, but I can help you all fix problems in your life. Some of the problems might not actually benefit you, but they're just going to benefit the next person who might get hit on their bike. And some of them will take years to fix, like it's taken years to do this, but I just want you all to know that it's something that is extremely fulfilling to me, even though, like the senator said, this is an extremely challenging place for people like us. And then secondly, House Bill 515, for those of you that have been paying attention to my particular work, I've been working on trying to get an anti-bullying bill through the legislature. I'm in year 3 now. In 2024, it failed on the House floor. In 2025, it failed on the Senate floor. And now I'm giving it another go, and I think we've got a good pass. I had to water it down a little bit to make it more palatable, but in exchange this year, one of the things I've done is remove from public schools an outdated reporting requirement that they send, in an Excel spreadsheet, all of the bullying incidents that happened in their school, because no one at the State Department of Education was doing anything with that information. So rather than having school administrators spend time sending information to people who aren't doing anything with the information, this bill will make sure that the families involved in serious bullying incidents, both the bully and the victim, are made aware that this is happening in a timely fashion so that those families can do the things and address the situations in real time, because we know what happens when bullying goes unaddressed.
I do have a question about the bullying bill, that if they're not keeping track of that data and sending it, are they keeping track of it somewhere else just so that there is statistics backing up these things for like down the line changes?
So the question is, if they're not obligated to collect it and report it to the State Department of Education, are they collecting the information for other purposes? The short answer is, I hope so. I hope so. The most important thing in the short term is that the serious incidents, the ones that result in an expulsion or some sort of suspension, are being addressed in real time. But I don't think schools currently aren't obligated to collect it except to report. So unless we can come up with a good reason for why they should collect the overall numbers, which I'm certain they do, no, they're not required to do that.
On the e-bike bill, since verbiage seems to be so important here, does this include e-scooters, like the incident that happened back in September?
Yes, the question about House Bill 500 is whether the e-bike bill addresses scooters. It does not. Nor does my bill create classifications of e-bikes based on speed or anything like that. All it is designed to do is make sure that motor vehicle drivers know they have a duty to avoid colliding with all cyclists. And at the same time, the second change in the bill is to make sure that it is clear that e-cyclists also have to follow the same traffic laws that traditional cyclists do. It's a double-edged sword, but we've assumed that they've been present in these sections of code, and the courts are unwilling to make that assumption. Yes, sir.
Can you speak of your bullying bill, where the superintendent of public instruction stands?
I know her staff, and I haven't asked her this year. She's been supportive for years. So I'm assuming that she's even more supportive with one that will give her staff more breathing space. But she's equally committed to the same problem that I am, which is not, minutia of spreadsheets and reporting numbers that go into the ether and no one's doing anything. It's making sure that the kids and the families who are involved in these incidents, the kids that are the most vulnerable quite often, and not just the victim, often the bullies are living in the types of circumstances that we should care more about. She's very much committed to making sure that we're doing all we can, or at least taking more productive steps to address the problem in real time.
Thank you so much for coming. I guess I'll talk a little bit about some of the legislation that I've been working on, and I'll maybe tell the story about how that happened. Anybody in here live on the Mesa? Part of District 19 includes the Mesa, and this was even before I was elected 2 years ago. I was approached by a gentleman that lives on the Mesa and wanted to tell me all about this great program that the Mesa had been working on for fire safety, and that they created very much like a neighborhood watch program for fire safety. And we met for coffee, and he showed me, all of this great work and how the fire department had come out and actually done a test to see how quickly every single member of the community could get out. Also to show me all the amazing things that they had done to help protect the entire community, applied for grants to build barriers because they're in that WUI system, provided all these mechanisms for people to, fortify their roofs, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of it, he said, we've done all of this, and yet our insurance premiums are going up. And we're actually seeing individuals get non-renewal notices from the homeowners insurance providers, and we don't know why or what we're supposed to do about it. Like, how do we get the insurance companies to care about all the work that we're doing? And I said, I'm a public educator. I know nothing about insurance, but I will take it on. And that was a year and a half ago. And now I know a lot about Title 41, I know a lot about insurance. And through this process, we've actually had town halls and meetings all across this part of our state, from Garden Valley all the way down to the Magic Valley, meeting with people and really digging into this. And so I've now been working with the Department of Insurance and other lawmakers, and we have a series of bills that we'll present this session to address the issues of increased homeowners insurance rates and non-renewals. So in Idaho currently, we do not have anything in code for homeowners and for non-renewal. So that means a provider does not even have to tell you that they're going to issue a non-renewal, let alone give you a notification period for you to try and find another provider. So that would be the first. The second is a bill that is actually in place in all of the states surrounding us, and that's a transparency bill. It says that providers have to give you the metric by which they are judging you before they, increase your rates. So, you get a -1 for not living, close enough to a fire district or not having, access roads or egress, et cetera, You get a, +2. They use those metrics, but in Idaho, they're not required to share those with us. And so it would be a transparency. They would have to provide that, as well as provide any homeowner who is having an increase or a non-renewal with mitigation efforts. If you did this, we would, not issue this non-renewal. And then also, it would require the Department of Insurance to house all this information. So if you, a homeowner, were to get issued a non-renewal, you could go to the Department of Insurance, that's what government is for, and see how many providers are in my area. Because another problem that we're seeing in Idaho, especially because it's a lawless state for homeowners, is that if you get a non-renewal or a cancellation, these out-of-state, out-of-country surplus line companies will call you and say, I'm your only option. It's gonna be $10,000 a month, $40,000, if you file a claim, and we're your only option. If you don't know what a surplus line is, surplus line insurance back in the way back was for things like your yacht, or the Department of Insurance director talks a lot about like Peekaboo Street, what's insured her legs or knees, because these are where you insure very specific things that are not your family's largest asset, right? Your largest asset, and that's your home. That's not what they're meant for. But we're seeing that increasingly in Idaho because people are being told they don't have other options. Then there's a third bill that we may or may not see this legislative session that offers mitigation grants to folks, communities, municipalities who are really trying to do some of that work to create fire barriers, to harden their homes, and to make sure that we can try and reduce our premiums. And if you have not visited Murphy Woodhouse, who is a reporter for the Mountain West, put all the data that the Department of Insurance collected into an amazing infographic that you can see on Boise State Public Radio, and you can actually pinpoint your area. Crazy enough, the highest increase in premiums is 83705. That's just over here by the airport. And so if you're wondering why are the premiums going up there so much more than places like Garden Valley, where we're actually seeing a huge number of non-renewals, or places that are in and around forested areas, it's because of the metrics that these providers use. They think about things in terms of, if there were to be a fire, how does fire spread, how many homes would be affected, how many clusters do each of these insurance companies pocket in these different areas. And so 83705, and then in Canyon County, have the densest compacted homes that they see as the greatest fire risk. The problem with all of that is that we aren't being told that. We aren't being told what we can do, and we aren't even getting to see the actual metrics that they use to determine these fire risks. So that's really what I've been working on over the interim. Those should start to come to fruition here anytime. And then in building, I'm proud to say that the first bill that we voted on in the House today was a resolution that I wrote and was co-sponsored by all the members of State Affairs Committee, and that was a resolution against political violence. And then also really excited that also in State Affairs we were able to kill the bill, part of the DOJ task force, to eliminate and repeal the Hispanic Council. And then today we were also in really good company to at least neuter the flag bill for the city of Boise. You know, good things are happening. I know that a lot of terrible things are also happening or could happen, but those are at least a few of the good things this first week of session, first 2 weeks.
I have a question about all the building, like the contractors, when we talk about the density and how that increases our insurance rates, like, do they know about that? How it impacts the people around them that have been here for a long time?
Yeah, so the question is about density and the rise of insurance and just costs generally. And so yes, insurance providers absolutely know. And if they had a magic wand, I think they would probably say we would love the state to mandate across the entire state building codes and regulations and, you know, all of those things. But that's not the state of Idaho. And so what we have to do is really make things transparent, and then we really need to reach out to our cities. We are very blessed here in District 19 and in the city of Boise that, you know, we could make significant, you know, changes to building codes and those kind of things that could really provide some relief. You know, insurance is a business, and they're in the business of insuring, you know, homes, and they're gonna want those homes to be, you know, built right, especially, you know, commercial buildings as well. But yeah, so right now that would be a city and county, but maybe someday we'll have universal, codes. She's laughing over there. She's been here a lot longer than me.
On the point scale for you said that you mostly talking about renewals. Would insurers have to provide the reasoning for initial policies as well? So if you wanted to switch to another carrier, you could get that information versus your current, or if you're a new homeowner, you would have that information as you try to search for best policy.
The way that the bill would work is that every provider in the state of Idaho would have to provide their metrics so that you could see that. And that would be housed under the Department of Insurance. So you would at least know what metric, you know, State Farm or, you know, Allstate or Farm Bureau was using to determine whether or not you are in risk of either, you know, it's catastrophic risk, which was separate than fire, and then fire as well. And then, you know, you could then, you know, shop around, but at least also you would know how many providers are in your area. I mean, it was a news to me when I started this that there are 61 different providers in 83702. I mean, our district has multiple zip codes, but it goes by zip code, 61. And you think, okay, well, 61 providers, how are we all having these same, you know, increases? You know, why is this happening? Why are people having non-renewals? Why are people thinking that they don't have any options in this area, let alone in others? And so really what we just need is more information. You know, and I trust that with more information, we will all be better equipped to fight some of these non-renewals or cancellations.
Have you ever found that some of the metrics are wrong or are incorrect data based on incorrect data?
So that is not for me to determine. I'm not an expert on the metrics that are used. I do have faith that if this legislation goes through, that the Department of Insurance would be very clear, you know, on those. But we can't even tell if they're good metrics or not if we don't know what they are. And, you know, so some of them use very, very sound science that our fire communities use about which way a fire would burn if a fire were to happen based on weather and, you know, all the appropriate data. But there could also be some that are not using those kind of, and there could be some that are just saying fire and they actually don't use any metric at all. But until we have some kind of transparency for them to provide to us, you know, we're just at the mercy. And like I said, this is not, I didn't make this up. This legislation has been brought to all the western states around us.
How was the industry reacting to these potential openness?
You know, they have had to do this in other states. So we actually have the value of Colorado really fighting all those transparency measures. Montana recently went through it. They are not so far opposed. It's not asking anything that they aren't currently doing. What's happening right now in Idaho is that insurance providers are making a lot of money, and business should make money. That's what it should do. But they shouldn't be making money because they can here, because they don't have to have all the same transparency metrics that they do in other places, and so they're just kind of like, you know, well, this is the money game right now. we should be able to be in the same, situation that our neighbors are. So, and I do think, over time that what the real goal is to make sure that all of our communities, because they want to stay in business, they don't want to leave. Where are they going to go? There's no, this is the job of insurance. So they want to make sure that our communities are sound. They want to make sure our communities are safe. They want to provide metrics. They want to tell us, you need a new roof, you need this kind of roof, you need this kind of building material to be safe. Like, they would love the opportunity to have more input.
I was hoping you could repeat the resource you mentioned. You said Murphy.
Oh, Murphy Woodhouse is his name, and he is a Mountain West news reporter, former firefighter, knows a lot about this subject and many other subjects as it relates to wildland fire. Yeah, Boise State Public Radio. Oh.
Yeah, you had mentioned neutering the flag bill as just like a win. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
The RS that was brought into state affairs today would have required a penalty for any city that it flew a flag that was not part of a list of flags. The one thing that was removed from the bill from the previous law was flags for cities and counties, which is how the city of Boise and Bonners Ferry were able to get around the bill. That language was put back in committee.
Okay.
So there would be a penalty if they are to bring that back with the amended language as was agreed in state affairs. There would be a penalty, but there would also, cities and counties could fly their own flags.
What was that penalty, do you know?
It's $2,000 a day per flag.
Okay.
What?
Civil penalty. Yeah. Well, it would be our money back in, yeah.
Quick question, listening to you talk about insurance, have you had any discussions with, this is a classic data science problem. Seems like that'd be a great thing for a grad program at BSU to provide to the students a great experience, give you data that you can then go and use to make better laws. Do you ever have that kind of partnership?
So thank you for that question. The reason that we are able to run these pieces of legislation and do so effectively is because the Department of Insurance did put out a data call to all providers in Idaho, requiring them to give all of this information. And so if you look at, and that's where Murphy Woodhouse came in and put that all in really condensed and understandable with the state, and you can zoom in on everybody's zip code. One of the requirements would be in the bill that data call be annual, so that we can see those things over time. And it includes, premiums, it includes, how many non-renewals or how many we lost. And it's pretty startling, what's been going on in the state. And no different than some of our other western states 5 years ago, but it's time that we join the rest of the pack. So there is lots of data, and I would say really great opportunity. This is a topic that is front and center all across the country. A friend of mine was in DC for an entirely different conference, and at that same convention, there was a huge conference on insurance and fire and how we're going to insure our homes sustainably over the long haul. So this is a big topic.
I have a fast question. We're so fortunate to be here at D19 with such incredible representation. Oh. And it's like, I needed that today.
Was that planted?
But seriously, if we call and write you and provide support, is there anyone else that we can be calling, writing? I mean, granted, showing up is so important, being here physically, but in terms of any other folks on committees,
positive
whatnot.
ones, not the ones we do daily.
Anyway, what can we do? What else?
So the question was about, in addition to communicating with us and expressing positions on bills and other people, is there anything else they can do? Is there anything else you can do to communicate with people that probably could benefit from hearing a perspective or someone, you know, with an informed voice. I will say the answer is yes. What's interesting about this is that every single piece of legislation, you know, gives us kind of an initial vote count. And once we have that initial vote count, usually we can tell you which 1, 2, or 3 people absolutely need to hear from you, and enough about them that will help you tailor your message in a way that make it resonate. So what I would suggest is if you're really interested in engaging in that kind of working a bill with us, just reach out to us and say, hey, I'm working on this bill. Who are the 2 people on your committee that are on the fence or persuadable or open to any of those things? We can let you know who those are, and we can usually give you a little extra information that might help you nudge them along.
As a returning Boise State student studying in the hard sciences, I feel that the education I'm getting since last legislative session with the education bill passed has been majorly negatively impacted. What can be done about that? Is there anything that you guys are introducing or talking with about those bills concerning like DEI conversations in school, or what teachers can and cannot say is like hard fact? They're basically in our classrooms, like not even ensuring what a real hard science fact is. Like we get to decide as students what's real or not, and I feel like I'm paying so much for a great education that I'm not getting now.
First of all, as a social scientist, I rarely allow hard scientists to force scientific questions on them, but I'm going to indulge in your case. The short answer is no. Sorry. So the question is, given all of the anti-DEI, anti-CRT, ESG, LMNOP, pick your, acronym du jour, like it's having real consequences in the classroom. It's having real consequences on students' lives and faculty's lives. Am I doing anything about it? I don't have any legislation right now that I can justify taking time to work to take me away from all of the usual defense that I have to do. 2 more things. One, I will say, I don't know what organization, but one of the the organizations, the outrage machines, was like, we need the Attorney General to investigate the DEI that is still going on our campuses. And this is, and I'll be frank here, and I usually don't talk in racial terms because I don't think the context is usually set, but I am comfortable saying that personally, to me, this is how I feel our system of white supremacy perpetuates itself. The bills that were passed last year were based on an assumption that forcing students to learn about, pick a subject, white privilege is so bad for Idaho that we should allow those kids to sue immediately. They should be able to call the Attorney General and sue. Well, the first question we should ask ourselves is, how many of those calls have come in? So the same people that were making that argument last year are now saying that the mechanisms for remedy that they proposed, we shouldn't even be worrying about those and we should just jump to the next thing. They want us to be so scared of all of this stuff. So don't be scared and push back. Lastly, I will say there was a bill introduced a couple of days ago in the House Education Committee, and it was a bill proposed by Chairman Hawkins that would remove a section of code that was just added 6 months ago. And it was a section added in the parental rights bill that bans all instruction on human sexuality, which in another section of code is defined as all kinds of things, including gender identity. And he's removing the half of the sentence that says you can provide instruction in that stuff, assuming that the parent opted in, if it's age appropriate and if it's developmentally appropriate. He wants to remove that provision. He wants to say no instruction. It doesn't matter if it's age appropriate, doesn't matter if it's developmentally appropriate, doesn't matter if the parents opt in. He wants to remove it. And I will say that one of the problems that I hope, and this is something that we work on, is that the people who are so deeply ideological about singling out and targeting people are now getting to the point where they're starting to come in conflict with one another. Because what I asked in committee is I said, well, if I can't opt my son, a high school son, into a conversation about the Hickox case, which is a case about gender identity, how are kids in Idaho supposed to learn about a case that went all to the Supreme Court? And it immediately, you should have seen the room. Everyone was like, OMG, what are we doing? And I hope that the people that are interested in both the opt-in aspects of that law and the the parental rights aspect of that law, get together and figure out what it is they're trying to do. Are they trying to prevent everyone from learning about everything?
Yes.
Or are they just trying to... And I said it out loud. But I don't think they are. I think what they want is they want our kids taught about very specific things, and how they get there is where we are sand in the gear. So I apologize for the underwhelming but long answer. I wish I could, with the stroke of a pen, fix some of this stuff, but I can't. But I am open to ideas.
Do you have the number for that bill?
Senate Bill 1198 is usually the one people are talking about from 2025.
So I would just add to that. Here's the thing I want to say about what Representative Mathias said, is what I have found is when you think, for those of us who have studied McCarthyism, at some point people just got sick of it, and it stopped. And I think what's happening right now, and Representative Church was talking about affordability, that's on people's mind. They're trying to put food on their table, pay their health care. I had a friend come over, he's retired, and said they're on the ACA and they were paying $800 a month for insurance, which shocked me. And then they said because the enhanced premium wasn't gonna be renewed, now they're paying $2,400. And they said they couldn't afford it, so they don't have insurance, right? Retired, worked hard for our community, right? And so I think what's happening here is what we have to do is keep our eye on the prize. Is there are folks that want to divert our attention over here to this stuff while they bully and take people's rights away, but it's gonna come to a halt. And I think when you go back and look at McCarthyism, you study that, at some point people just got sick of it. Like, it's just started to topple. And I think we're getting to that point, quite frankly. I mean, they're still introducing things. People, have this ideology, but we're focused on the things that matter to people. Now, we will defend when a bully strikes, absolutely. People have seen me do that on the Senate floor over and over. And we have to keep our eye on the prize of what is going on in our economy, what is going on in power and control, and how we work together with, by, and for the people, right? So that is an unfortunate part that's happening right now, but I think it will, as Representative Mathias said, people are starting to be in conflict now. They're can't triple stamp a double stamp. And they're running out of things to deny people. And they're in conflict and so forth. And people are gonna start finally like, look, man, just give it up. This is done, right? You've instilled enough fear and so forth, but I see people starting to throw up their hands.
Kind of wish that I had cared a little bit more about legislative sessions and everything that happens when I was younger. But I have different motivations now that I'm, nearing 40, and I'm learning alongside trying to be active and, a part of all of this. Just to clarify, right, all 105 seats are up for election this year, and will we continue to see you, in our district, or what is that going to look like?
Well, that's up to you, but you will see me on your ballot.
And those are 2-year terms, right? So that's, yeah,
correct.
Okay.
Is there any legislative activity going on about the concerns of the governor having the Idaho State Police involved in ICE? What was the question?
Oh, God.
I was
concerned
about the governor signing a 287G, which allows state and local police in the state of Idaho, specifically state police under his authority, to participate in ICE activities. Usually it's like use the local jails as a temporary holding facility, things like that.
So your question is the governor still doing that? Are we trying to oppose him? Tell me about your question.
Yeah, I guess, are we trying to oppose it? I mean, is the legislature doing anything? I mean, the governor's doing what the governor's doing. Is the legislature, is there any opposition that's coming up?
I'll take a stab at this and people just jump in. We're in an unfortunate part in our state where there's a faction of folks that are preoccupied with people's papers. Today in JFAC, we're talking with the Department of Corrections, and we're talking about big picture things. J.D. Ward Engelking's asks a great question about mandatory minimums and how that's pumping people in there. What's the impacts on the budget? Right, big picture stuff. And then somebody asks the question, how many illegal aliens do we have in the prisons, and what are they costing us, and why are they there? Well, there's like 250 because they had committed crimes, and in our country there's due process, and we want them held accountable in our state, right? We always do that, no matter where you are. If you did in our state, we're taking you, right? And so they are in there. But I thought it was fascinating. We're talking about all these needs and big picture stuff, and then there's always this question about immigration. So there's an unfortunate fascination about that, and that's coming from the top of our country right now. I can't even believe Saturday I was cleaning the house because I hadn't done that in a long time. I hadn't looked at the news, anything. It's like 4 o'clock, and if I looked down at my phone, and I went up to my husband, I said, "Did someone get murdered today in Minnesota?" He said, "Yeah." He had just come back from the office. I was like, "What?" And the federal government chastised the person who's dead.
And the guy that did it.
And I can't accept that, not in this country. At the top of leadership, you look into what is going on, and I do think, I'm gonna say it publicly, I put it in my newsletter if you get it. And if you haven't seen my newsletter, go to my website. But after that mega bill was passed in July, there's tons of money flowing into ICE. And in fact, like 170, I mean, if you look at all the charts, we have invested more in ICE than, I think, 15 other countries and their entire military. That is the largest funded organization as far as law enforcement goes in our country, outsourcing the FBI, the CIA, all of those. All on the backs of Medicaid recipients, right? Because that bill cut all the Medicaid. Of course, it's gonna be after the midterm, so we'll see it then, but has infused money to militarize people against American citizens. And now you see what's happening is they're calling in the National Guard against ICE.
Good.
So back to your question, I got off track, but the unfortunate part here is what you've seen Governor Little do is he has like a $300,000 emergency fund. What he did, you saw in the summer, he said, I'm gonna put that towards support of catching dangerous criminals who are here illegally, and then you can take them. Really, literally, I mean, there's a lot of political jabber in there to appeal to a base of people, but really what's happening is as folks are released from the prisons, and if they are here without the appropriate papers, they're calling ICE, and then ICE is taking them somewhere else to detention facilities. Now, what we saw happen in the summer in Wilder, boy, that got out of hand. But again, you saw people rise up. People weren't tolerating that. I was on the phone a lot. And that's again the importance of civic action. People were on their heels on that. In the state of Idaho. So you stand lock arm in arm when you see tyranny, when you see kids put in zip ties, when you see the government mishandle citizens, that mattered. I haven't seen them back since, not in that way. And so I think it's really important we keep our eyes wide open here. We protect our neighbors and our family members. I don't know what I can do formally other than continue just to speak the truth. I see these cameras going because I know it's the right thing to do. I stand with American citizens and it doesn't, and human beings in our ground.
I have a question about pedestrian and cyclist safety. Let's change the topic. We sat for years in our neighborhood committee, and we talked about traffic. And I understand it's a local issue, but we keep bumping into the lack of enforcement and the inability to use things like speed cameras or cameras at crosswalks to ensure that my kids aren't being hit on their way to school. Do you think there's any avenue within the state to allow for a little bit more enforcement of our basic traffic laws?
I think the chair of the Transportation Committee would disagree with your framing that anything the legislature is doing is preventing locals from enforcing. But what he would say is he doesn't like how much emphasis certain municipalities and local governments are putting on non-vehicular traffic, which is why there is a prohibition, for example, on the use of license plate readers, which is something the law enforcement community wanted. They said it will help us catch speeders, it will help us catch speeders, it'll help us do all these things. The legislature said no. So I do think the legislature has an appetite for preventing the ability to do some types of enforcement, innovative enforcements. But I will say, if you take a peek at House Bill 508, that gives me a little hope. Last year there was a bill that would really hamper, highway districts, county local government ability to dedicate, infrastructure funds to non-vehicular traffic, and they're going to roll that back a little bit. I think they're starting to realize that was an error. There might be other revenue sources that these jurisdictions can use to do that. So I'm hoping that the legislature will start to back away from trying to get too much into local government's business vis-a-vis traffic and safety.
What we see in our neighborhood is we're spending millions on traffic calming, but not getting any speed ticket revenue. Like, doesn't that seem like a revenue source to keep kids safe?
Red light revenue?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a workaround that you see at all? Is there?
You know what I'm talking about? I'm pointing at you.
No, but I'm also exhausted. What?
We were at an 8 county commissioner meeting, and we were talking about the legislature has prohibited collection of certain fines and fees, and basically there were some people that might be interested in addressing that. I gotta get back to you on that.
Okay, I'll send you an email.
But, oh God.
Oh,
If I don't respond to you, I just say that if I don't respond to you right away, it's just because I'm overwhelmed right now, but somebody will.
Mark,
Eventually.
so thank you. Mark's Representative Sauter and Pohonk are looking to repeal the 2018 law, which prevented courts from putting holds
That's it.
on people's driver's licenses for excessive speeding, not paying their dues. So trying to recapture some of that enforcement.
And it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. That's what I was talking about.
21 million in unpaid fines and fees.
Yes, that's it.
Wow.
So that bill might be coming, so bless you.
There's a lot of movements to cut Medicaid expansion. But pre-Medicaid expansion, there was a pretty significant amount of money in the catastrophic health fund, which has got right down. So it's not as if there's like you can't have it both ways. Somewhere or another, we're going to be paying for these people who are uninsured. And I guess the question is any of that being addressed in terms of to refund the CAT fund? If no, it's just
So the question is about Medicaid expansions, always have a target on it, and that when we actually administered Medicaid expansion, we actually dismantled the catastrophic funds and indigent funds. So basically, because there's a lot of basically general fund monies that were spent on like substance abuse and so with courts and first responders and that kind of stuff. So it shifted over. Yeah. No, you're talking too much reason there. So basically, people just hate, like there are certain people that just hate the fact that Medicaid expansion exists, and what they'll say is that able-bodied people shouldn't have medical insurance and they should earn it for themselves and they should not be getting it from the state. But they're just not thinking about really what the poverty limit is and how little bit that is. And in fact, over half of those folks are working actually, or they're getting care to an elderly or a child, or they're going to school or whatever, right? You're making so little money, like less than 20 grand a year, and you can't make ends meet, right? With rent and food and all. So there's just this group of people that just hates it. And no matter what reason, amount of money, whatever, it doesn't matter. Now, we keep saying, look, here's all the facts, and we just keep it out there. And again, public pressure is great. People know it's going to be hard to touch it. I mean, they'll try, but 62% of people voted for that, and the popularity's only risen, and people are using it, and times are tough. So again, you got to keep the pressure on. People keep the pressure on. I think they'll go for it, but it'll be hard to do because there are a lot of folks that voted for that. In fact, I saw folks who were colleagues across the aisle who were anti-Medicaid expansion, and because of an election realized, oh gosh, my constituents really want this, and it moderated them. Because that's what elections do, right? Moderate you. Like, oh my gosh, my constituents really do want this, it's not just in my head. And so that's what happens. A long way to get to your answer of no, there's no consideration of that.
First of all, I want to say that we're here just because we know you are beleaguered and we want you to know that you have people who care.
Yes.
Has to do with the education tax credits, and there's a whole lot of talk on the public about that's $50 million that could be used to feed the elderly, to help Medicaid. Is there any talk whatsoever in the legislature that maybe we should look at that?
The Democrats?
No.
We see it every minute.
Yeah, the governing class is not having that conversation. In fact, I'd be willing to bet right now that if an education program was gonna be cut in order to fund those types of services, it would be launched before it was the voucher, for sure.
Is there any talk of putting any oversight into it?
I want to get to yes.
So we are, like as a community, doing everything we can to protect our neighbors and our loved ones. And I just want it to be clear that nothing is happening on a legislative level to combat ISIS presence in Idaho.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. Here's what I would say, is there are no formal bills right now that probably would get through this body to control ICE. I don't think so.
Not even holding them accountable to the law?
We could try. We could try.
Trying would be great.
What can we do then to help push that?
Well, one thing you can do is if you have evidence of a federal officer breaking a state law, you just call the local police. That's all you have to do. That's what I do.
Yeah, but does anything happen?
Boise police is pretty good at enforcing the law.
So, as far as like protecting the people that are out there doing things, that's like my number one concern. So, obviously, if you pay attention to what happened in Minneapolis most recently, I feel like that person was doing everything right to protect themselves and everyone around them, but they were still executed. And so there's people in this community that are out there every single day, in my opinion, risking their lives and their safety and their privacy and doing a lot where other people wouldn't stand up and do those things. And I feel like they don't necessarily have the law on their side. So it's more of just like a request, I guess, from my community that I represent, that we consider maybe if we can't pass laws to stop what ICE is doing, how can we pass laws to protect and make sure the law is very clear about like recording officers, getting badge numbers, what is assault and like what a protester's rights are. There's a lot of gray areas, I feel like, and if you have a weapon on you, is that considered something that is a threat? Is that something worth being executed over? Concealed carry laws.
Listen, that's all in the law right now.
Yeah.
That's all in the law right now. You can, and this legislature has defended the right to carry at demonstrations. That is in the law. And I think that's what's so heartbreaking about what we saw in Minnesota is this man was carrying a firearm, but he wasn't brandishing it, but he had the legal right to carry it, and he had permits and all that in Minnesota. There are some Second Amendment groups I have heard come out like, hey, this is a little troubling, telling people they can't carry a gun at a demonstration. Although we were concerned about some legislation that was happening here about domestic terrorism and allowing certain firearms at like Pride and other events because of what happened up north. So there are laws right now that protect people to open carry and be at a demonstration as well. You cannot brandish, right? But actually what he did was legal. And we have plenty of laws to protect, for the record, people who are peacefully protesting.
I will say if you're looking for kind of actionable toolkits to making the law work in your favor, so you can use it in real time, there are organizations like PODER, ACLU that provide user guides on things you are allowed and not allowed to do in situations where conflict and tensions are rising.
Cool.
My neighbor has 2 daughters that will graduate from high school this year, and they're looking at schools that have been already accepted at a number of universities. They chose not to go to a single school here in Idaho because they're both girls, and they were worried about their personal women's rights of receiving proper medical care. I don't even know what the question would be or what's going on. I just wanted you to know what's going on in her home.
Well, I'm happy to take that again. You jump in if you like. I'm with you.
What's the question?
So she just sharing that her daughters who are going to college don't really want to stay here, even though Brad Little said he wants kids to stay here and be Idaho. And so she's like, my kids don't want to stay here. They're 2 girls, and they're probably a little concerned about reproductive freedom and getting health care, especially since we've lost a third of the OBGYNs in our state. 43%. Oh my gosh, it just keeps going up. And what's interesting is in the Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee, they had a presentation on graduate medical programs and trying to recruit physicians. And toward the end of the presentation, the chair said, "Melissa, we haven't heard from you." And I said, "Well, let me say this. You can throw all the resources you want at recruiting people, but if you don't have laws that create an environment where people want to stay here, what good is it?" And that's the problem, is we've criminalized medicine in our state, and so the physicians don't want to stay here, and it's very harmful. And the thing I try to tell my colleagues across the aisle is you don't want these graduate medical folks to study abortion care. Well, I think it's like a quarter of women's pregnancies end in miscarriage. So the most dangerous time in their life, and what is, an ectopic what is a miscarriage? You need abortion care. And so you're not gonna teach somebody abortion care when you have all these pregnant people. Not every pregnancy goes right? So I'm trying to help them understand that. But that's the whole hullabaloo around the University of Washington, a world-class medical school where we have seats and we've built up resources over time for these programs. And they wanna limit our seats there and go over to Utah. It's mesmerizing. But here's the thing, y'all.
Abortion in Utah more than we do here.
We live in a state where the 3 of us are in the minority in numbers. And what I've said in the Senate chamber before is, I gotta say something today, because even though I'm in the minority here, the majority of the folks out there, outside that window in District 19, elected me to say what I gotta say today. And that's the unfortunate part. We're doing everything we can to advance the values and protect the rights that we value. We're outnumbered all the time. And in this state, to your question, you have to get permission from the chair to get a bill even heard. We can't even get a permission for some of these things, right? So it's not like other states where everybody has a right to introduce a bill. I gotta make sure I got permission to get anything printed and introduced. So
Permission from who?
the chair has all the power of what goes into their committee in the state of Idaho. So I gotta do the dance a lot to get bills printed and heard. Although I think I'm pretty good. I've got well over 20 bills printed and passed, and pretty good ones. But there are just some that won't allow. And so again, this year, as a personal bill that just gets read across the desk and documented, you'll see for, I think it's ever since my time, it's been 12 years, we did add the words again. It was read across the desk on January 23rd, my birthday, civil rights, sexual orientation, gender identity to add to our civil rights statute. But I could get a hearing for it, so I had to run a personal bill. So it's documented in the record, no discussion, it just gets read across the desk. And the desk is at the Senate. So there are many things that we want to do. The structure as it is, you have to get permission to do it. And many times we're outnumbered. So there are venues that we will do like a personal bill just to document it. We'll do press conferences and press releases, and we'll speak out in the media all the time. But it's just the unfortunate thing that we're up against. But it doesn't mean that in my heart, my legs, my soul, all the way down my bones, I'm not fighting every day. I am a former Women's Center director that was outlawed by Senate Bill 1198. So I know I've been on the other end of it. So everybody who knows me knows I take that very seriously. And I will stand up for anyone